The rain tapped softly on the tall windows of the city museum. Outside, everything looked gray and still, but inside the museum, the air was warm and quiet. It smelled faintly of old wood and fresh paper. The halls were wide and polished, filled with beautiful paintings and quiet footsteps. Malik walked slowly past a row of oil portraits. He was 16, wearing clean jeans, a hoodie, and sneakers that didn't squeak. A black sketchbook was tucked under his arm, and he held a pencil loosely in one hand. His eyes moved carefully over each painting, taking in the colors, the faces, and the brushstrokes. He wasn't in a rush. He had come here for a reason. Across the room, Mrs. Bennet stood near the information desk. She was a museum guide, older, kind-looking, with silver hair tucked into a bun. She noticed Malik, but didn't say anything. She saw the way he studied the art, and the quiet respect in how he moved. But someone else was watching too. Mr. Harris, one of the museum's security guards, stood leaning near a column. His arms were crossed tightly. He was tall, maybe in his 60s, with sharp eyes and a mouth set in a straight line. He had noticed Malik the moment the boy walked in. Something about him, maybe his age, maybe his skin, made Mr. Harris pay extra attention. Malik didn't notice. He stopped in front of a large painting near the back wall. His eyes widened just a little. His hand holding the sketchbook started to tremble, just slightly. He stared at the woman in the painting for a long time. Mrs. Bennet tilted her head, curious. Mr. Harris narrowed his eye. The museum was still quiet, but the air had changed. Just a little. Mr. Harris shifted his weight and stepped forward, eyes locked on Malik. He had seen kids before laughing too loud, touching things they shouldn't. He thought he knew what was coming now. Malik stood still, his gaze fixed on the painting. His sketchbook hung at his side, forgotten for a moment. The woman in the portrait had warm brown eyes and a soft smile. She wore a bright scarf and sat proudly, like she was telling the world she wouldn't back down. Then came the voice, harsh and cold. "Hey," Mr. Harris said sharply. "What are you doing over there?" Malik blinked and turned. "I was just looking," he said, his voice calm but unsure. "Don't get too close," the guard snapped. "And what's that in your hand?" Malik lifted his sketchbook slowly. "It's just for drawing. I wasn't touching anything." Mr. Harris didn't seem satisfied. He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You here alone?" Malik nodded. "Do your parents know you're here?" the guard asked. Malik's jaw tightened. "Yeah." Miss Bennet started walking over, sensing something was wrong, but Mr. Harris was already raising his voice. "I've seen this before," he muttered. "Kids hanging around, causing trouble. You need to leave." "I didn't do anything," Malik said, his voice shaking now. "I said the guard barked, loud enough for other guests to turn and stare. Malik froze. People were watching. His chest tightened. He looked around, but no one said anything. Not yet. Then he took a step back, and another. "Don't walk away from me," Mr. Harris shouted, moving fast now. Malik turned and ran. Through the quiet halls, past startled visitors, his shoes pounding against the marble floors. The sound echoed like thunder in the still museum. Mrs. Bennet called out, "Wait. Stop." But the chase was on. Paintings blurred past, guards shouted, guests stared. And just as Malik reached the entrance, he stopped. His hand shot up, pointing, not at the door but at the painting behind him. Everyone turned to look. The silence was loud. Malik stood near the glass doors, breathing hard. Rain streaked the windows behind him, but he didn't move to leave. Instead, he raised his arm and pointed back across the room. "To that painting," he said, voice low but steady. Everyone turned. Mr. Harris slowed to a stop, confused. Mrs. Bennet looked in the direction Malik pointed. "That's my grandmother," Malik said softly. A ripple of confusion spread through the crowd. The painting showed a proud black woman, sitting in a wooden chair. Her eyes were calm, strong. She wore a colorful scarf and a simple necklace. A brass nameplate below read, Lena Johnson, 1964, portrait by C. Everett. Mrs. Bennet stepped closer. She looked at Malik, then at the painting. Her eyes widened. The shape of the woman's face, the curve of her smile looked just like his. Malik reached into his sketchbook and carefully pulled out a photo. It was small and worn around the edges, but clear. It showed the same woman, a little older, standing in a garden, holding a young boy in her arms. "That's me," Malik said, pointing to the boy in the photo. "She brought me here when I was little. She told me this museum mattered, that I mattered." No one spoke. Miss Harris's mouth opened, but no words came. Mrs. Bennet gently took the photo and held it up next to the painting. There was no denying it now. The woman in the painting was Lena Johnson, and she was Malik's grandmother. She was part of the civil rights movement, Malik added, voice barely above a whisper. "The museum never put that on the plaque." His hands were still shaking, but his eyes were steady. "I wasn't trying to steal anything," he said. "I just came to see." The crowd that had gathered stood frozen, silent. The painting stared back at them, all calm, all truth. Mrs. Bennet held the photo in her hands, her eyes softening as she looked between it and the painting. Slowly, she turned to the guests who had gathered, and then back to Malik. "I remember hearing about Lena Johnson," she said gently, "but I didn't know this was her." Malik nodded. "Most people don't." He took a step forward, the fear in his body now giving way to something deeper, grief, pride, maybe both. "She wasn't just my grandma," she marched in protests. She helped organize bus boycotts. She started a food pantry in her neighborhood when the stores wouldn't serve black families. A woman in the crowd whispered, "That's amazing." Malik kept talking, his voice steady, but his hands still clutched the sketchbook. "She told me stories about being yelled at, spit on, even arrested, but she never stopped fighting, and after all of that, someone painted her, said she was strong and beautiful and deserved to be remembered." He looked at the painting again. "She used to bring me here when I was little. She'd stand in front of this portrait and say, 'You belong in places like this, Malik. Never forget that.'" His voice caught on the last word. He blinked fast, trying not to cry. Mrs. Bennet put a gentle hand on his shoulder. She turned to Harris and said, not unkindly, "This young man had every right to be here." Mr. Harris didn't respond. His face had gone pale and he looked down ashamed. Malik opened his sketchbook and showed them what he had drawn. It was a pencil sketch of the same portrait, almost finished. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest and full of care. "I wasn't hurting anything," he said quietly. "I just wanted to draw her again. I miss her." Someone in the crowd whispered, "He's really talented." Mrs. Bennet turned to the other. "The museum's record on this painting only lists the artist. It doesn't say anything about Lena herself. That needs to change." There were quiet nods all around. For the first time since he arrived, Malik felt like someone had truly seen him. He didn't just belong in the museum, he was part of its story. The room stayed quiet, the kind of quiet that feels heavy, like everyone is thinking the same thing, but no one wants to say it out loud. Mr. Harris stood stiffly near the wall. He wasn't chasing anyone now. His arms had dropped to his side. He glanced at Malik, then quickly looked away. His voice, when it finally came, was low and rough. "I didn't know," he muttered. Mrs. Bennet turned to him, her eyes calm but serious. "That's the point. You didn't ask. You assumed." He didn't argue. Malik sat down on the bench facing the portrait, opening his sketchbook again. His pencil moved slowly over the page. This time, his hand didn't shake. The other visitors began to move aside, giving him space, but no one left. They stayed, watching quietly. some looking back at the painting with new eyes. A woman whispered to her son, "She was a hero." Another man said, "The museum needs to tell her story." Mrs. Bennet sat beside Malik, careful not to interrupt his drawing. She looked at the photo again, the one of Lena holding little Malik in her arms. The picture told its own story, a story of love, of strength, of history passed down. After a few minutes, Malik stood up. He looked at Mr. Harris. "I don't need an apology," he said, steady and strong. "I just want people to see her, to really see her." Mr. Harris nodded, ashamed, not offering excuses. Mrs. Bennet spoke up. "We'll talk to the director. We'll make sure the plaque is updated with her full name, her story and her legacy." Malik nodded once. He turned to the portrait one last time before heading for the doors. "She used to say," he murmured, "sometimes silence is louder than shouting. I didn't get it before, but I think I do now." And then he walked out into the rain, head high, sketchbook in hand. Inside, the painting still watched over the room. The woman in the portrait didn't say a word, but her face seemed to speak volumes. A week later, the museum looked different. The same halls were still quiet, still filled with art and footsteps, but something had changed. A small crowd gathered near the back wall, where Lena Johnson's portrait now hung under new lighting. A fresh brass plaque had been installed just below it. It read, "Lena Johnson, 1929-2003, civil rights activist, community leader, grandmother. You belong in places like this." Near the base of the plaque, smaller text had been added, "Grandmother to Malik Johnson, artist in training." Malik stood near the edge of the room, dressed neatly in a button-up shirt and clean shoes. He didn't say much, but his eyes scanned the faces in the crowd. Most were strangers, but they had come to learn, to listen, and to remember. Mrs. Bennet stood at the front and gave a short speech. She spoke about history, about forgotten names, and about the power of art to hold truth. Then she looked at Malik. "Sometimes," she said gently, "it takes one brave person to remind us what we've missed." Malik reminded us, and we're better for it. There was soft applause. A printed program was handed out to each guest. Inside was Malik's sketch of the painting, now finished, with his signature in the corner. Underneath, the caption read, "Drawn with love, remembered with pride." Some people asked Malik questions afterward, about his grandmother, about his art, about his plan. He answered each one with quiet respect. Not far away, Mr. Harris stood by the front desk, now handling visitor check-ins. His posture was a little straighter, but his voice was softer. He had gone through new training, and though Malik hadn't asked for anything, the museum made sure it happened. As the event wound down, Malik stood alone for a moment in front of the painting. The rain had stopped outside. The sky was clearing. Mrs. Bennet stepped beside him. They didn't speak at first. Then she said, "She'd be proud of you." Malik smiled a little. "I hope so." As people slowly left the museum, the portrait stayed behind, still watching, still waiting, still teaching, and in the quiet voice of the narrator, the story closed with this: "Sometimes, it takes a mistake to show the truth, and sometimes, a boy pointing at a painting is the start of something bigger." If this story moved you, share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your perspective. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful stories that shine a light on truth, justice, and the moments that change everything.